Okay, so before we have a look at generative expand and generative fill, let's just remind ourselves of content aware fill. Take this little image that I've got here, taken at Bude a little while back. Let's suppose for a minute that I want to print this image out at A4 and make a reasonable job of it. Couple of things that I need to consider. First thing is the horizon slopes. If you look at the horizon, it's actually slightly lower on the right hand side than it is on the left hand side. I need to correct that because otherwise when it's framed it's going to annoy me forevermore. The other thing is, if I'm going to print this out at A4, the actual image needs to be A4 in size, or at least have the same proportions as A4, because if it doesn't, the printer will have no option other than to leave a white space around some areas, or to chop off bits of the image as it feels fit and not as I might want to do it. I can actually cure both of these problems with the crop tool. So if I go to the crop tool and choose it, I can then go to the little drop down, and if we look at the drop down, there's a number of presets. Unfortunately, there isn't a preset for A4. Not a problem, I'll simply make one. I'll go to the width times height times resolution option, and in the width I happen to know that the width of A4 landscape is 297 millimeters and the height is 210 millimeters, and I'll leave the resolution at 300 pixels per inch, which should give me a decent print. Before I do anything else, I want to save that preset so I can use it at any time in any other image. So I'll simply click on the little drop down box, go to new crop preset and give it a name, and I'll just call it A4. Okay, if we now look at the image itself, you can see a couple of things. First of all, the image wasn't A4, it was actually straight out of the camera, which means it has a ratio of 2:3 or more or less. So if I look down the right hand side, you can see that there is a bit there that's going to get chopped off, and the same down the left hand side here. Also you can see quite clearly that the horizon isn't straight either, so I'm going to need to do something about that. Okay, let's have a look at straightening the horizon first. To straighten the horizon, I can simply go to the cropping tool and click somewhere near one of the corners, and I can drag the image around and by eye align it with the grid that's produced. Alternatively, I can click on the little ruler and then just drag out a line along something which is horizontal, like for example the horizon, and Photoshop will automatically adjust my image along that line. So I've now got the horizon level, so I can now concentrate on the composition. So I might want to move it over here a little bit, so I make sure I include that post. I want to include this other post here on the left hand edge, so I'll just extend it that way a little bit, make sure I get that post in that's down here, and there we have it. That's what I want my image to look like. However, there is a problem with this. As you can see, by doing that I've introduced into the image areas where there is no data. I've actually made the image bigger than or smaller rather than the canvas. So I've got areas where there isn't any data. If I was to print it like that, those areas would simply print as white and I'd really be no better off than I was before. In order to fill those areas quickly, I can alter the fill option from the default to content aware fill. Now what content aware fill will do, it will attempt to fill those areas by sampling the areas around and filling it with some pixels which Photoshop thinks matches the image. Now with small areas like this, it generally makes a fairly good job. If the area is small enough and simple enough, content aware fill is very good and very quick. Let's give it a go. So having done that, I'll simply commit those changes by clicking the little tick. And there we have it. And as you can see, that was pretty quick, and the area has got filled in, and you wouldn't know. It looks pretty good. So that's content aware film for you. You can also use content aware film to get rid of certain things. It's a little bit more hit and miss, but it can work effectively. If, for example, I then decided I didn't want this post here, I could use one of the selection tools. It doesn't really matter which one. I'll just use the polygonal tool, draw sort of round it, highlight it like that, right click and choose content aware fill, and it suggests that it might want to look like that, so I'll just OK that for the time being. All sorts of other options you can choose, but that will do for now. And you can see it's not made a bad job of it. It's done, you know, a reasonable job. However, I don't want my post back, so I'll just do Control Z to bring it back, and Control D to undo the selection. So there's my image of Bude. So you can see the content aware fill works very quickly and reasonably well, providing that it's nothing very complicated. Let's have a look at something a little bit more tricky. Let's have a look at this girl on her bike, or should I say a girl on Jason's bike. Now when this image was taken, the photographer hasn't composed it very well maybe, and they've chopped off part of the front wheel. Now you might think that content aware fill would fix that. Unfortunately, it tends not to make a very good job of things like this. Let's give it a go and see what happens. So I'll click on my crop tool to bring that up. I'll expand it so it covers the area where you would expect the wheel to be, and maybe a little bit more. I've extended the canvas so we've got this white bit around here. Make sure it says content aware fill, and I'll tell it to commit those changes, and we'll see what happens. And as you can see, it's not made a decent job of that at all. It's tried to fill in the area by sampling the image area around, and it's made a complete hash of it. So let's undo that. We'll do Control Z to get back to where we were. And let's give it another go. So I'll use the crop tool again, like I did before, and I'll extend the area more or less the same amount as I did before. But this time, instead of using content aware fill, I'm going to choose Generative Expand. Now, Generative Expand uses artificial intelligence. It tries to fill in the missing area, not by sampling the pixels around, but by trying to work out what the image is and completing it. With varying degrees of success, but generally it's pretty good. So having done that, let's make sure it says Generative Expand, and we'll commit those changes and see what happens. Well, for a start, nothing much happens because a prompt pops up saying, what do you want to fill this with? Now, I want Photoshop to work out what to fill it with, so I'm just going to leave the prompt blank and hit Generate. And Photoshop is going to have a think about it, and it's going to come up with some solutions. Now, in order to do this, it must be connected to the internet, and as you can see, it does take considerably longer than the content aware fill, but the results are much better. You can see there the result. Let's just put that so you can see it. That's the default result. When you use Generative Fill or Generative Expand, you always get 3 variations. and you can choose whichever one you think looks the best. If you think none of them are the best, then you can always hit generate and it will go and produce you another 3. And you can do that as many times as you like until it does eventually come up with something that you do like. So I'll settle for that one. So you can choose from the options that it offers you which one you like. And as you can see, the results are pretty good. As with the content aware fill, you can also use it to get rid of things. So we've got this thing down here, I don't know what it is, a piece of paper or something. You can use that in the same way as you can with the content aware fill. Click on the selection tool, just draw around it, right click on it, choose generative fill. You want Photoshop just to fill in the area, so just hit generate. Don't bother to type in a prompt and it will go off and fill in the area for you. So you can also use it to get rid of objects like that. And the nice thing about the generative fill is it works very well even on complex backgrounds, patterns, bits of tartan, that sort of thing. It does a pretty good job at getting rid of stuff. Let's give it maybe something a bit more challenging. Let's go on to this picture that I've got here of Brooke. So we've got Brooke stood under an arch. I want to make this a square crop. So click on my cropping tool. I'll choose a square crop. And I want to expand this so it includes the top of the arch. So have the top of the arch and make sure it goes down as far as Brooke's feet. I want to move it a little bit that way so I get a little bit extra down the right hand side here. And I've got this quite a big chunk down the left hand side that needs filling in. Now this is a bit more complex because Photoshop has to work out where this arch goes and complete it. Let's see how good a job it makes. Make sure I've got Generative Expand enabled. I'll click on the commit button. Again, I won't type anything in the prompt box and let it get on with it. And off it goes, connecting to the internet, working out what to do, working out what the image could possibly be, and generating some possibilities for me. So it's produced this, which doesn't look anything like what the actual scene looked like. That's better. That's more or less as it was. We've got that, which is not really like yours. It's more like the one in the middle there. So I'll choose that option there that we've got in the middle. And there we have it. So it's made quite a good job of that. I should just point out that whenever you use the generative fill or generative expand, it does actually create a new layer. So if I go to the layers palette and have a look at that, you can see that the layer with the corrections in it is on the top here and the original one is underneath. If I switch off that top layer, that's what we originally had, that's what we've got now. This is important because if you then want to make any changes to the whole image, you have to be careful about what you alter. If I wanted to change, for example, the exposure and make the whole image darker or lighter, I might need to merge those layers together first. So you could do, for example, Shift Control E would merge the layers together. do bear that in mind. Let's have another example. Let's choose this picture of Dan. Okay, so we've got Dan here, photographed at Southbury on Francis. First thing I want to do is to crop it A4 size. So I'll go to my drop down list, and because I created that preset earlier, there it is in the list of presets, A4. It's actually horizontal, I want it vertical in this case, so I'll just tip it up so it's vertical, and I can maneuver it around, have it how I want. So I'll set it like that, I think. Now I probably could use content aware fill to fill in those areas. Tell you what, let's just do that because it's quicker than the generative fill, and it will probably make a good job of those. So I'll let it do that. Yeah, so it's not done too bad a job there. Now let's suppose that I want to take that picture of Dan and I want to change the background completely. I don't like the stone wall and the background that we've got there. I want to change it for something else. So if I want to change the background, I've first of all got to select the background. So I can do that by selecting select, and there is no option to select the background, not in Photoshop, there is in Camera Raw, but what I can do is select the subject, which will select Dan himself, and then I can select an inverse, which basically reverses the selection so the background is selected. I can then use the generative fill to replace the background. So I'll just do edit, generative fill, and this time I'm not going to leave this box blank. I'm going to type in what I want. So maybe, for example, I want a wooden fence. I type in wooden fence, click generate, and off it goes and produces me, hopefully, a wooden fence, or 3 wooden fences by default. There's wooden fence 1, 2, 3. If I don't like any of those, I can hit generate and it'll go off and produce me another 3. If I don't like any of those, I've changed my mind completely. Maybe I want a brick wall instead. I can simply change the prompt, hit generate, and it goes off. And produces some brick walls. Eventually. That one's quite nice. We've got that one, or that one. Simply choose the one that you like. Or maybe you want some urban art. Limited only by your imagination and how many times you want to press generate. Okay, let's have a look at something a little bit different. I'm going to bring up a picture of Sarah. Now, again, I'll just crop this. It fits in there nicely, so I'll just choose my crop tool and just OK that, so it's cropped to the right size. But maybe now I decided that I don't really like the shoes she's wearing. I think some black boots might have been a better choice. Let's just zoom in, have a look at her feet. Okay, so let's change her footwear. Let's click on the selection tool. Now I don't need to be too accurate, just draw somewhere around the feet. That will do. And then I can right click, choose Generative Fill, and type in maybe black boots. Click Generate. And see what it comes up with. So it's suggesting that, or that, or that. Again, I can always press Generate again if I don't like any of the ones it produces, but I'll stick with that one for now. It just demonstrates what's going on. So you can change things that exist, you can get rid of things, you can also add things. If I go back to the picture we had of Brooke, maybe we want to arm Brooke and give her a sword. Let's just zoom in a little bit, just use Control Plus to zoom in so we can see what we're doing, and let's put a sword in her hand. I'll use the selection tool. I want the sword to sort of come out the back of her hand here a little bit, so I'll just start it there, and then I'll go up there somewhere. So we'll put a sword somewhere in that sort of area. Right click in here, go into Generative Fill, type in sword and hit Generate and see what we get. Okay, so that's not bad. There are some other options. You can basically choose the one that you want. I'll stick with that one. I think that looks pretty good. So we can add a sword to Brooke. Okay, let's have a look at this picture of Claire, because I want to demonstrate one other thing that can sometimes happen if you use Generative Fill or Generative Expand. Here we have a picture of Claire shot in portrait mode, but I might want to decide that it would look better in landscape orientation. Well, one way of doing that would be to use the cropping tool. So I'll choose the cropping tool here and choose the A4 option if I do want it A4, and expand the frame to be an A4 landscape. And obviously I'm going to get some blank areas both to the left and the right, but I should be able to use the Generative Expand to fill in those blank areas, even though they're quite extensive. So got some blank areas there. Let's choose Generative Expand and click on Commit. Won't put anything in the prompt box. Hit Generate, and Photoshop will go off and do its thing and generate some imagery to fill in the blank areas. So far so good. We've hit a problem. The generated images were removed. Please review the guidelines and try again. Okay. This sometimes happens if you use the generative AI options. Photoshop seems to have this habit of rejecting images like this, particularly if they contain lots of skin tones and that sort of thing. It seems to think that you're trying to do something that maybe you shouldn't, and you're breaching its guidelines, So let's try something else. Let's choose the generative, the cropping tool again rather. I'll have to reposition my frame because Photoshop threw away my original changes. So I'll position Claire in the landscape frame again. I'll make sure Generative Expand is selected. Click on the Commit button, but this time instead of leaving the Generative Expand prompt blank, I'm just going to enter a full stop. So having entered a full stop, I'm then going to hit Generate. This tells Photoshop to be a little bit less sensitive in the way it applies some of the guidelines. Now this doesn't always work, but it does work around 90% of the time and makes Photoshop a bit less strict in applying the guidelines. So let's see what we get. And as you can see, it's completed that properly now. We've managed to fill in the sand and the grass, and the result looks, quite convincing. This doesn't always work, as I say, but it does work about 90% of the time. It's just something that you need to be aware of. If it doesn't work, you can always try filling smaller areas with the Generative Expand or Generative Fill, and that sometimes will work instead. Okay, here's another example. Let's take this photo of Megan taking a idler's wood. Let's make it a little bit more dramatic. Nice be if she had an animal maybe with her, so I'll just take the rectangular selection tool and just draw a rectangle down by her side there. And what I'll do is I'll right click in that rectangle now, choose Generative Fill, and we'll add a wolf. So hit generate, off it goes. It should give me 3 options of some wolf-like creature. Let's see what it comes up with. That would help if I spelt wolf properly, wouldn't it really? Not wolf, but wolf. Try again. And this time hopefully it'll come up with something a little bit more canine. That's better. So we've got a wolf there, and again you've got your typical 3 variations. We can always hit generate to get more, but you get the idea. That one I'll do for now. As she's got a wolf there, it might be nice if she had a red dress on rather than this little black number. So I'll take my rectangular selection tool again. I'll just draw roughly over Megan herself and just type in red dress, and hopefully if I hit generate, Photoshop should be intelligent enough to work out where the red dress is going to go, and it should apply it to her. Let's see what happens. And there's 1 variation, 2 variations. I don't like what it's done to her face there. 3 variations. I don't like that face at all. What I could do is abort that altogether. So I'll just delete that layer. And I'll select again, maybe from the neck down. Oops. And type in red dress. Try again. And see what we get this time. That's better. We've managed to retain her face. Despite the fact I asked for a red dress, I've got a white one there in that example. But obviously I can always hit generate and see what else it will produce me. So you get the idea anyway. So again, you simply choose which one you like the look of, and there you have it. You can manipulate an image in that way. Taking things to extremes, let's get rid of that altogether. I won't bother to save that. You can always create a new blank image, so I'll just do File, New, and I'll select the default Photoshop size and just hit Create to create a blank image, and now I have a blank image. If I select the whole of that, I'll just do Control A to select it all, and then if I right click on here and hit Generative Fill, I can create my own image. So I can, for example, I can type in seascape with rocks, slow shutter speed, and hit generate, and Photoshop will go off and it will generate me an image that it thinks matches what I've asked it to do. And let's see what it comes up with. Okay, that's not bad. So it's created me an image with some rocks and a slow shutter speed. There are variations on that I could choose. There we are. So we've got the variations, and again I could always click on generate if I wanted more examples. That one's quite nice, I'll settle for that. You can then also obviously expand on that if you want, so I can sort of maybe draw a rectangle there and type in fishing boat, hit generate, and see what that gets me. Again, if you don't like one of the ones it picks, you can always make your own up, and you can obviously go carry on adding various elements as you want. So I'll type in lighthouse and hit generate. So you can create your own image from nothing. Okay, that just about sums up the various uses of generative fill. Have a play and have fun.